What Hollywood won't tell you about the real Spartans? What if I told you? Everything you know about Spartans is basically a protein shake-fueled lie? No, they weren't all shredded supermodels in bronze underwear. And no, they didn't scream in slow motion before every battle. Welcome to Leevano Chronicles, where we strip away the movie magic and dig into the real ancient history, facts, flaws, and all. Today, we're diving into the Spartan myths Hollywood sold you, and what reality actually looked like underneath the six-pack armor. The Hollywood lie. The Spartans of legend stand before us, muscles glistening, voices roaring, bodies clad in little more than leather straps and confidence. This is the image burned into our collective consciousness by films like 300, where every Spartan warrior looks like he stepped out of a bodybuilding competition and onto the battlefield. But let me shatter that illusion right now. The real Spartans would barely recognize their Hollywood counterparts. First, let's talk about those infamous abs. In 300, every Spartan sports a physique so chiseled it looks like it was carved from marble by Michelangelo himself. Their torsos gleam under strategically placed lighting, each muscle group perfectly defined even in the heat of battle. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Real Spartan warriors probably looked more like modern-day powerlifters than fitness models. They were strong, yes, but their bodies were built for function over form. Imagine a man who could march for days in full armor, not one who spent hours perfecting his pectoral definition. The armor itself is where Hollywood takes its greatest liberties. In 300, King Leonidas and his men go to war wearing what amounts to bronze underwear and red capes. It's visually striking, no doubt, but historically absurd. A real Spartan hoplite would be nearly unrecognizable under layers of protective gear. Picture this, a bronze breastplate weighing upwards of 30 pounds, greaves protecting the shins, a massive round shield called an aspis that could cover most of the body, and a Corinthian helmet that obscured the face entirely. This wasn't just protective gear, it was psychological warfare. The sight of an advancing wall of these faceless bronze warriors was enough to make many enemies turn and run before the fighting even began. Now, let's address that iconic line, "This is Sparta." It's dramatic, it's quotable, it's complete fiction. The Spartans were famous for their laconic speech, where we get the word laconic from, meaning they valued brevity and silence over dramatic proclamations. In battle, they advanced in terrifying silence, the only sounds being the rhythmic clanking of their armor and the synchronized stomp of their feet. Their discipline and cohesion were their greatest weapons, not Hollywood-style battle cries. The Battle of Thermopylae itself has been wildly exaggerated. While it's true that 300 Spartans fought against overwhelming Persian forces, they weren't alone. Ancient sources tell us there were actually about 7,000 Greek allies fighting alongside them, including Thespians and Thebans. The Spartans were the elite corps, yes, but not the sole defenders, and that famous last stand? It was likely more of a tactical rearguard action than the glorious suicide mission portrayed in film. Even the geography of Thermopylae gets the Hollywood treatment. In 300, the battle takes place in a narrow canyon with sheer cliffs on either side. In reality, while the pass was certainly narrow, it wasn't the dramatic chasm shown on screen. The real terrain was strategic, but not quite the natural fortress the movies would have you believe. The Spartan fighting style has been similarly romanticized. The film shows them as individual warriors performing acrobatic feats of combat. In truth, Spartans fought in the phalanx formation, a tightly packed wall of shields and spears where individual prowess mattered far less than unit cohesion. Each man's shield protected not just himself, but the man to his left. Breaking formation meant certain death, not glorious solo combat. Perhaps most misleading is the portrayal of Spartan society. Asterisk 300 presents Sparta as a bastion of freedom standing against Persian tyranny. The reality was far more complex. Sparta was essentially a military dictatorship built on the subjugation of the Helots, a slave class that outnumbered Spartan citizens by nearly 10 to 1. The famous Spartan military might existed in large part to keep this enslaved population under control through systematic terror and violence. Even the famous Spartan discipline wasn't quite what we imagine. While they were certainly more austere than other Greek city-states, archaeological evidence shows that Spartan art and luxury goods did exist, just in more restrained forms than their Athenian counterparts. The idea that Spartans lived like monks in a military barracks is another exaggeration. The weapons themselves are worth examining. In 300, the Spartans wielded their spears with the precision of samurai swords, performing elaborate thrusts and spins. In reality, the Dori Spartan spear was about 7 to 9 feet long, not exactly suited for flashy maneuvers. Most phalanx combat involved pushing and short, brutal stabs in extremely close quarters. The secondary weapon, the Xiphos short sword, was indeed a Spartan specialty, but it was more of a brutal stabbing tool than the elegant slashing weapon shown in films. The ugly truth now that we've dismantled Hollywood's shiny myth, let's examine what Sparta was really like, and it's not for the faint of heart. The Spartan social system was one of the most brutal and uncompromising in human history, a fact often glossed over in popular portrayals. The Agoge, Sparta's infamous education system, was essentially state-sponsored child abuse disguised as character building. At age 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and placed in a brutal training regimen designed to strip away all individuality and weakness. They were deliberately underfed to encourage stealing, but punished severely if caught, not for the theft itself, but for the failure of being caught. This created a culture of cunning and ruthlessness from an early age. Physical punishment was constant and severe. Boys were flogged publicly, sometimes to death, in endurance tests. The infamous contest of endurance at the altar of Artemis Orpheus saw teenagers whipped until they bled, with the one who endured the longest being honored. What is often left out is that these rituals sometimes resulted in actual deaths, a fact the Spartans seemed to accept as part of their system. The treatment of Spartan girls, while less violent, was still extreme by ancient standards. They underwent physical training and competed in athletics, not for empowerment as modern interpretations might suggest, but to become mothers of strong warriors. Their education emphasized duty over personal desire, and their worth was measured almost entirely by their ability to produce healthy Spartan soldiers. Now we come to the darkest aspect of Spartan society, the Helots. These were an entire population enslaved by the Spartans, outnumbering their masters by as much as 10 to 1. The Helots worked the land so Spartan citizens could focus on military training, but their existence was one of constant terror. The Spartans maintained control through systematic violence and psychological warfare. Each year, Sparta would formally declare war on the Helots, effectively legalizing the killing of any who showed signs of rebellion. More disturbingly, the Cryptia, a sort of secret police composed of young Spartan men, would conduct regular terror campaigns, murdering Helots at night to keep the population cowed. This wasn't warfare, it was state-sponsored terrorism against an unarmed population. Even Spartan military dominance isn't quite what it seems. While they were certainly formidable warriors, their reputation for invincibility is overstated. They suffered defeats like any other army, and their famous stand at Thermopylae was ultimately a losing battle. The Spartan military machine was as much about maintaining internal control as external defense. The Spartan political system was equally grim. While they paid lip service to notions of equality among citizens, the so-called equals, or homoioi, in reality power was concentrated in the hands of a few elite families. The famous dual kingship was often riven by factionalism, and the Gerousia Council of Elders wielded tremendous power. It was hardly the proto-democracy some modern admirers imagine. Even the vaunted Spartan lifestyle wasn't as austere as commonly believed. While they certainly placed more emphasis on military discipline than other Greek states, archaeological evidence shows Spartans enjoyed imported goods, art, and even some luxury items. The image of a society completely devoid of comfort is another exaggeration. The Spartan economy was fundamentally unsustainable. By dedicating their entire citizen class to military service and relying on slave labor, they created a system that couldn't adapt or innovate. While Athens flourished culturally and economically, Sparta remained stagnant, eventually becoming a sort of living museum of militarism that other Greeks visited as a curiosity. Perhaps most telling is what Sparta didn't produce. While Athens gave us philosophy, drama, democracy, and stunning architecture, Sparta's cultural contributions were negligible. No great Spartan poets, playwrights, or thinkers emerged to shape Western civilization. Their entire society was geared toward one thing: producing soldiers. In the end, Sparta's greatest legacy is as a cautionary tale, a society that elevates military prowess above all else, that institutionalizes brutality, and that relies on slave labor ultimately has nothing to offer humanity but lessons in what not to do. The real Spartans would probably be horrified by their Hollywood portrayal, not because it's inaccurate, but because it makes them look like heroes rather than what they truly were, the most successful slave state in history. The next time someone holds up Sparta as a model society, remember the Helots, remember the children raised without love. Remember the society so focused on war it contributed nothing else to human progress. That's the real Sparta, stripped of Hollywood's bronzed, revealed in all its grim reality. So there you have it, the real Sparta, stripped of Hollywood's shine. Not a utopia of freedom-loving warriors, but a brutal machine built on slavery, fear, and relentless discipline. If this deep dive surprised you, if you never realized how much myth has been sold as history, smash that like button. Let's get this truth out there, and if you're hungry for more unfiltered history, hit subscribe. The past is full of stories just waiting to be pulled out of the shadows. No bronzed luging, no Hollywood spin, just the raw, fascinating truth. Thanks for watching, and remember, history isn't always pretty, but it's always interesting. See you in the next one.